Imagine discovering that a prominent activist faked his death to escape justice. This is nothing you have to imagine, as this is no fictional tale. This is the story of Nicholas Alaverdian, a man whose face you've likely seen after he made headlines for manufacturing an insane identity to try and escape justice after spending years advocating for it. Oh, wow. This guy's a real
Nicholas Alaverdian appeared via video conference before a Utah judge today, wearing an oxygen mask and in a wheelchair from inside a Utah jail. He continues to insist authorities have the wrong man, claiming he is Arthur Knight from the United Kingdom.
This is like one of the most interesting things that I've ever seen online ever in my life, and by God, I'm here for it.
36-year-old Nicholas Rossi even tried to speak with a fake English accent and claimed to be someone else.
Are you Mr. Rossi?
Lady, my name is Arthur Knight Brown.
He has not admitted his name or birth date accurately, and so.
Objection, my lady. That is complete hearsay.
Comment down below more stuff y'all want to see me talk about on this channel. Press the like button if you want to see more content like this. And get ready, because this shit's about to get wild. This guy is the meaning of pathetic, pathesis. He is the Greek god Pathesis. And once we've gone through this full story, you will be able to see just how terrible this human being is in a situation. It's hard to not laugh at it for its sheer ridiculousness. It is difficult to not read this, learn about it, and go,
His extradition hearing became a circus. He arrived in a motorized wheelchair and wore an oxygen mask, which appeared to be a prop.
Your oxygen mask is not connected.
We'll all be looking at our phones in unison, like, or your TV. Some of you guys are watching from your TVs right now. Hey, family in the living room. Hey guys, just kidding. Keep playing, keep rolling. The highest CPMs come from living room watchers. You guys watch for a long time. But go ahead and hit me with the Nicholas. Nicholas is a man who's contextualized his life around false victimhood, self-righteousness, narcissism, and a drastic, deep, dark need for attention. He's like everyone. He's like a lot of people.
This is the extraordinary story of Nicholas Rossi, a fugitive who American prosecutors say faked his own death and fled to Scotland.
Who exactly is Nicholas Alaverdian? It seems that our old buddy Nick was a political prodigy due to his ambitious attempts to reform the child welfare programs in Rhode Island. I didn't even know Rhode Island was still a place.
I'm gonna have to ask you to put your shirt down, sir. Oh, crap, I get the one straight cop in Rhode Island.
After escaping a troubled home, Nick spent time in the DCYF, which is the Department of Children, Youth, and Families in Rhode Island. It's a department he'd make quite a fuss about later on. He's up.
3 weeks after recording this confrontation with a courthouse sheriff's deputy, Nicholas Alaverdian returned to court for a restraining order tied to his battle with the DCYF.
According to reporting from the Providence Journal, his parents fought a lot and would divorce. This was a paywalled article that we hacked to be able to access, so I'm not sure if we can show any of this. So like if we get claimed, I'm sorry about this if we don't show it, but it's a real article. There's a link to it down below. You gotta pay to look at it, so nobody's gonna look at it. The Brown Daily Herald, in an article about Nick from 2012, describes his parents as abusive alcoholics. Nick's mom would abscond with her 3 kids, Nick included, and never tell Nick's father where they were. It's not that Pappy cared that much, though. Nick's mother started dating a man named David Rossi, the Rossi he would later use for his name, Nicholas Rossi. We'll also get into that. Very interesting stuff. The Providence Journal, which has a lot of great articles about Nicholas Alaverdia, shares David Rossi's account of what it was like with Nick and his siblings. They were all uncontrollable, but Nick was the absolute worst, diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. 2 great combinations of things. A lot of people got ADD. Narcissistic personality disorder, you gotta be on something to have that shit, bud. How about this dog right here? She's a narcissist. I swear to God. The world has to revolve around her at every single moment. Nick constantly needed control and he would hit his mom regularly. One time when he was 12 years old, after a screaming match ensued, after Nick demanded to follow his mom into a store, he began punching her. So David, apparently after having years of pent-up frustrations, broke the 12-year-old boy's nose, I assume by punching him directly in the face. He'd spend 2 days in jail, but was bailed out and was later cleared when Nick's mental health issues were explained. So like, apparently it's sometimes legal to punch a 12-year-old in the face go to jail, and then get your record expunged.
That's the America I know.
This is when Nicholas Alaverdian, aka Nicholas Rossi, would find himself in state care under the DCYF. The beginnings of his political career are rooted in his time here. In 2011 and 2012, he would make appearances on news networks for claims that he was beaten every day by other kids.
He was living in a series of DCYF-funded group homes where he says he was a punching bag for the other kids. Every day you were beaten?
Every day in Florida, every day in Nebraska, every day in Rhode Island.
Every day, Nicholas?
I shoot every day.
The injuries, including bruises and sprains, are recorded in these medical documents. And Alaverdian tells us lawmakers also noticed the wounds.
He was also behind 3 bills that advocated for changes in the Rhode Island child welfare programs, such as ensuring that children couldn't be sent to foster homes out of state.
Now he's behind 3 bills that are endorsed by several lawmakers. One would overhaul DCYF. Another would stop Rhode Island from sending children out of state. The measures, he says, would save money, but more importantly, he tells us, save children from what he and too many others survived.
One of these bills would completely overhaul the DCYF. These bills had legislators behind them, and Nick was almost like a martyr for these causes. He was very self-righteous in these clips, too, making himself seem extra benevolent by stating he was fighting not only for people like himself who were beaten up, but also for the people who had beaten him up.
I chose to fight for the rights of myself as a kid in DCYF care and fight for the rights of those who were actually beating me up.
Guy's an absolute legend. Hopefully nothing horrible comes out about him and completely derails everything he's trying to do, allegedly. Because maybe he's not actually benevolent. Yeah, maybe all this is lies. I don't know. As a part of this fight that he was taking on, he sought a restraining order against his mother and stepfather, which led to a confrontation with a courthouse sheriff in which Nick would claim he was pushed, pinned against the wall, and punched.
You can't confiscate
Yes,
my
I
phone.
can.
No, you can't.
Watch. 3 weeks after recording this confrontation with a courthouse sheriff's deputy, Nicholas Alaverdian returned to court for a restraining order tied to his battle with the DCYF.
No, you're not.
On Monday, he claims, a misunderstanding over what was recorded provoked a deputy.
He pinned me against the wall. He pushed me. He shoved me. You can't confiscate. He punched me at one point.
Hey, that doesn't seem realistic to me. I'm just gonna go out and say this guy might be full of shit. Nicholas wasn't just fighting the DCYF in shaping policy, he was also involved in litigation with the DCYF, which stems from his time with them. He was only in the care of DCYF for 15 months, but the start of his time there in 2002 also supposedly marked the beginning of 11 years worth of medical charges totaling over $200,000.
Alaverdian was shocked when he received a 6-page medical bill and this letter asking for just under $207,000 for medical assistance. He tells us the bill covers an 11-year period, starting when he was placed in DCYF custody in 2002.
Because of this 6-page bill for nearly $250,000, he sued the states of Rhode Island, Florida, and Nebraska, as well as residential facilities and individuals such as administrators, doctors, and social workers.
The letter comes while Alaverdian is suing this long list of former and current state officials and the DCYF for how he was treated while in state care. He alleges he was physically and sexually assaulted while he was moved in and out of some 20 group homes in 3 states.
He again makes himself seem like a martyr and a sympathetic victim by stating, "Even though I paid in blood, I still have some worth to the state of Rhode Island as a dollar sign." Whatever the f he said. I'm not very good at impressions, especially not with him.
And it shows that even though I paid in blood, I still have some worth to the state of Rhode Island as a dollar sign, apparently.
I'm not sure exactly why the DCYF was the primary defendant in the lawsuit, considering that this is 11 years worth of charges despite only being in the care of DCYF for just over 1 year. But I'm an idiot. Maybe he's suing the systemic issues. He's suing the idea. Whatever his motivations, personal or benevolent, personal. He built a platform railing against the DCYF, even giving a speech about the department saying that it was worse than Guantanamo Bay, which is nonsense. That's totally bullshit.
ICE foster homes or tantamount to Guantanamo Bay or Abu Ghraib, and that's probably an understatement, is unacceptable, unconstitutional, and disgusting. It is repulsive. It is without interest to the ideals that frame the Constitution which we adhere to.
It's easy to be seen as the good guy when fighting for the kids. I mean, look at Save the Kids token. My favorite rug pull of 2021. Ah!
My name's Fraser.
My name's Jarvis.
I'm Tico.
I'm Rice.
I'm Nikon. And I support Save the Kids token.
Save the Kids token.
Save the Kids token.
Save the Kids token. Save the Kids token.
I like doing that. I'm gonna start doing that more often. Press like if you guys want to see more. I'm sorry. That's a good sound. I can't believe I can make that sound, like repeat it. This isn't to say that there isn't any malpractice with the DCYF. I'm sure there's a lot of malpractice, plenty. Human beings run systems. Systems are f***ed up. Human beings suck, etc. Like, I'm not downplaying that at all. This is why this idea and this sort of expectation, I guess, people have with these type of things is that they are probably bad, and that's why Nick was able to drum up so much support from legislators and news channels and just people in general. However, Nick is not the person who should have been the figurehead for such a movement, considering the dark truth that would come out about him. I mean, the guy has sexual crimes. So far, we've shared a few clips of him fighting the DCYF in 2011 and 2012. Well, before this, he was accused of some pretty heinous crimes. So even before he got his start as being the benevolent good guy. The first comes from January in 2008. A woman from Dayton, Ohio met Nicholas in an online dating app, and they went and met each other for lunch. The girl was a student at Sinclair Community College, and Nick had offered to walk her to her next college class, which she accepted. They had been in the stairwell to the basement of the building when Nick SA'd her. He pinned her against the wall, did a bunch of really insane shit, and said really crazy stuff. You guys can read about that outside of this video. YouTube won't like it, they'll take it down, but it's horrible. He's a piece of shit. She went to class in shock, and when she left, Nick was waiting for her, apologizing, saying he couldn't help himself because she was just so beautiful. So you can kind of get a bit of an idea of what he did. He then begged her not to tell anyone, and luckily she went to the police. This was in 2008. This was long before anything huge came out on him. The woman that Nick SA'd would press charges against him, and they would be fought for 6 years. And according to the Providence Journal, she sometimes doubted if pursuing the charges was the right thing, considering he'd have to register as a sex offender and how that's like a massive thing that can follow someone through their entire life. But the thought that he could attack someone else encouraged her to keep going, which is huge, and I'm really glad she did, because I don't like this guy at all. During the case, Nick had filed a motion for a new trial due to new evidence he'd found, and the evidence was that he'd found a MySpace post allegedly written by the victim who admitted to lying under oath to protect her relationship with her boyfriend. And a computer forensics expert testified that this post was altered or fabricated with 90% certainty. So this guy's whole life is just lies. It's crazy. Yet another L for Nicholas. When Nick couldn't beat these allegations, he tried to sue her for libel, saying that by characterizing him as crazy, he'd have his future damaged and she'd caused him great emotional distress. And this libel claim obviously was found to have no merit and be crazy. I mean, like, this guy's a nut. Nick would then have to register as a sex offender and have his mugshot taken, as well as pictures of his identifying tattoos. Classic sex offender shit. This wasn't the only thing that would put Nick on law enforcement's radar in Ohio, however. The FBI was also investigating him for fraudulently obtaining credit cards in his former foster father's name, amassing him $200,000 in debt, which is ironic, considering how upset Nick had been over a similar amount of money being charged to him. Similarly, this is where things take a very dark turn. Fortunately, the woman who he assaulted at the Sinclair Community College continued to press forward, and in 2017, the DNA that was found at the scene would be matched to an Orem, Utah case. The Utah happened in 2008, but it wasn't solved until 2017 because in 2017, they were inputting a backlog of kit evidence into a national database, which is when the match was made. It is at this point the walls started to close in around Nick. The new connection had been made that caused a looming charge over him. This paired with a credit card fraud, a warrant for his arrest. Once again, the walls closing in on this man. This isn't the end of it, though. Several more complaints against Nick were filed with the Pawtuck Police between 2008 and 2017 that are detailed by the Providence Journal. Once again, this is paywalled content, so we might not be able to show it, but it is out there and it is true. This guy is the biggest piece of shit ever. In July 2010, there was an incident where he'd supposedly held a woman against her will and taken her phone from her, only relenting after she screamed after becoming so incensed from the encounter. You know, that's crazy. In November 2010, 2010, police were called to an apartment after neighbors heard a man and woman fighting inside, and a crying woman answered the door with red marks and swelling around her eyes. Nick had reportedly grabbed her and knocked her to the ground, held her down, and slapped her. Police arrested him on the spot, and he had to be carried out to the cruiser, where he began hitting his head against the bars on the window. And at this point, he was pepper sprayed. This guy's a lunatic. It's crazy that all the good, benevolent stuff is what shone through initially, and he was able to keep up this good allure, this good thing, while all these bad things were actually going on in the background. It's like a totally unbelievable story. A month later, a woman filed a report but didn't press charges after spending an evening with Nick. The two went to dinner, then spent a few hours at his apartment where he'd incessantly requested and attempted to have sex with her despite multiple refusals. He took her cell phone from her when she tried to call 911 and demanded that she pay him back for dinner. What a piece of shit. That's insane. He drove her to an ATM and, like Dr. Phil, demanded $200 from her, then forced her to sign a document saying she couldn't pursue legal action and that the money she'd given him was for therapy. Only after signing was she allowed to leave. That is... What? How's that even a thing? How's that possible? In May of 2011, his wife of 6 months, who also was divorcing him and had an active restraining order out against him, went to the Pawtucket police station after he kept calling her. Apparently, an arrest warrant was sought for a violation of a protective order. You have a good idea of who this guy is. You know he's a terrible, absolute piece of shit. Well, how about he faked his death? Would you believe it if I said he faked his death and then he lived a life on the run? You probably wouldn't, but that's what we're about to go into now. After committing many atrocious acts in the United States, there was nowhere left for him to live or hide without getting caught because he's a monster and a piece of shit. In 2017, Nicholas boarded an American Airlines flight to Dublin, where he would begin his new life. Upon arrival, Nick left Ireland and traveled to the UK, more specifically to London, where he would live with 43-year-old food blogger Michelle Minar. And according to Minar, she was love-bombed by Nick until she let him into her home, and from there, he would become an absolute monster, demand money from her, control who she saw, control what she wore, and even put a tracking device on her phone. While still in the UK, Oliverdian would be arrested while still living with Minar after her. He was never charged with this before he was eventually extradited to the US this year, but there still is an active investigation. So after all this stuff happened a couple years ago, Nick remained in the UK after being rightfully kicked out of Michelle's home, and in 2020 he changed his name to Nicholas Brown and married a woman by the name of Miranda Knight. He would then take her last name. Around the time that the two got married, a report came out in the US that Nick had passed away from Hodgkin's lymphoma. News outlets received a written obituary detailing Nick's death, and within the obituary are some pretty funny details, honestly, including that he was buried at sea. He was surrounded by his wife and 2 kids, doesn't have any kids, and the in-credit music from the 1997 movie Contact was playing per his request, and his final words were, "Fear not and run towards the bliss of the sun." All that is nonsense, lies, bullshit. Is this real? How is this even real? How is this a real thing that actually happened? How is this guy real? This is crazy. Look at him. He faked his own death. And then he said all this shit. This is not real. This can't be real. But it gets worse, guys. You just wait. It gets worse. What's also important to note about the obituary is near the bottom, it claims that Nick survived, quote, warlike torture, which is just not true. And the entire paragraph talks about how he overcame severe beatings in Nebraska and Florida by DCYF workers while under their care. Nothing this guy says can ever be believed, obviously. In this section, he is martyred and portrayed as a survivor of the exact same things that he is quite literally guilty of committing and had to leave the country for. You can see his repeated and incessant continual use of self-victimization to escape responsibility from his actions. It's sickening, and it's part of that insane narcissistic personality. Like, a lot of people call each other narcissists, like, oh, you're such a narcissist because you think about yourself. This is a narcissist. This is like pathology. This is a crazy lunatic liar, dude. Not that many people have delusions of grandeur. This guy has delusions of grandeur. Anyways, back to all of the news outlets covering his death. On top of all this, a Facebook page was dedicated to his memory, and within this page are multiple pictures of politicians and even the mayor honoring his memory. This is all like before everybody knew all the insane shit that he'd done. It's crazy. It really seems like whoever wrote this evil piece of shit's obituary and memorial page clearly intended to portray him as positively as possible. Guys, he wrote it himself. Even more strangely is a mysterious woman named Louise, who claims to be Nick's widow, called his old pastor to host a memorial service, memorial mass in his name. Nick, it's Nick. Nick did this. Right before the mass was held, local Rhode Island police informed the priest that the caller was a scam. And as soon as the articles about Nick's death were published, both the FBI and police launched an investigation into the call and his death. He was already wanted by both agencies for failing to register for the sex offender registry and having $200,000 of credit card fraud, and also all these other charges that are coming up. So upon hearing of his death, investigators knew that something was wrong and immediately began to look into all the suspicious things surrounding this fool and his death. By the way, back to the phone call. Dr. Frederica Holmes, a speech analysis expert, analyzed the audio of the phone call and determined that Nick's wife, Miranda Knight, and Louise, his widow, were the same person. What's funny about this discovery is that another was made when investigators discovered that Miranda's full name was Miranda Louise Knight. How can this get any crazy? But if all this wasn't evidence enough, the FBI gained access to Nick's iCloud account, where they found pictures of him and Miranda enjoying nice dinners and traveling across Scotland and visiting historical sites, all while he's supposed to be dead. And because he's supposed to be dead and he actually wasn't, they could see that Nick is still in fact alive, and he has fled the United States, and he faked his death to avoid the FBI and avoid the inevitable consequences, the inevitable result of his folly.
It's based in red pill. Do you know what that means?
I don't.
Oh, it's like, that's dope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine getting a wife that's so supportive of you, you can get her to help you fake. Do people know that that's not illegal? Do people not know that that's illegal? It's very illegal to fake your death. Fun though. It sounds fun. Gotta be honest. So the seams are coming apart, and I think Nick starts to get a little bit nervous because he would change his identity and look in order to further avoid the police. But that didn't last long. Say hello to Arthur Knight, a Nicholas Oliverdian persona. After figuring out that Nick was still alive and in the UK, the search for where he was began. Luckily, it wouldn't be long before they were able to identify him as Arthur Knight living in a flat in Glasgow, England, and they were able to locate him because of his arm tattoos. He had contracted COVID-19 during the height of the pandemic, and staff at the hospital identified Nick because of an Interpol Red Notice, which is an international arrest warrant put out by the International Criminal Police Organization. It's pretty hardcore stuff. They put out a warrant for his arrest, and they're like, oh, this guy's criminal, and he's on the run. What a bizarre guy.
If an Interpol member country is trying to track down a fugitive for prosecution or to serve a sentence, it can send a request for a red notice to be issued via its Interpol National Central Bureau. When investigators finally came into contact with Oliverdian, he looked a lot different and was almost an entirely different person in general. I mean, if we go back to the videos of him from 2011, 2012, this guy looks way different. Firstly, as mentioned, he went by the name of Arthur Knight, but his backstory and physical appearance were also dramatically different. You see, Nick, or Arthur, was only able to move around due to a motorized wheelchair because he had severe scarring in his lungs from COVID-19. And this had led to his leg muscles atrophying and him needing machine assistance to breathe 24/7. This could be the karma, or whatever people say. This guy's evil and he's done all these horrible things, and then hopefully he's not lying about something like that as well. That would be terrible if he was also lying about that. That would be really bad. Furthermore, the man who was thought to be Nick claimed to be a former Irish orphan who came to England and survived on the streets selling discounted books. So, with a backstory that specific, how could that be fake? He then claimed that he was a lecturer at Glasgow University but had to give up teaching because of COVID. When asked if he could corroborate the story by asking some of his friends from the streets, he said, unfortunately, they were ensnared by the lures of the streets. Very based, very red-pilled. It's kind of how the streets be. The streets of Glasgow. By the way, Glasgow University had never heard of him. Arthur, if you couldn't tell, claims that he is not who the police are after and that he has never been before a court of law and that people have gotten the facts completely wrong. There's a video of this, by the way, if you guys want to watch that.
Not only am I not guilty, I have not even been before a court of law to prove my innocence.
Yeah, this guy is actually this guy, and this guy is a piece of shit, lying freak monster who needs to go to jail. Despite his claims that he is really Arthur Knight and not Nicholas, his neighbors and businesses have evidence proving he is not he's not Arthur. A manager named Kenny Lowe at a local bar described him as a posh boy who was obsessed with JFK. Which is not a very Arthur Knight thing to be. Additionally, he was seen staring at Kenny's lunch, which was coronation chicken, and he asked Arthur if he would like some, and Arthur asked what it was, and when told it was coronation chicken, he claimed he had never heard of it, despite it being a very popular British dish, which would be like me not knowing what like fried chicken or something like that is, like a hamburger. What's that? Even I know what coronation chicken is, and I haven't been British since 1776. And get this, a neighbor also reported seeing Arthur standing up and walking around despite being wheelchair bound. So, you know, sitting for that long does get tiring, so I kind of understand where he's coming from. I'm sorry, that's insensitive to people who are actually wheelchair bound. I apologize. Can you ever forgive me? With all this extra media attention, Nick had numerous opportunities to ham up his character and really make people buy into his new persona. In one interview, Arthur talked about how he and his wife lived a normal life before the investigation and how the media has totally ruined their lives. He then tried to stand up but flailed backwards with his wife catching him.
I can't, because I can't breathe. I can't walk. People say that's an act. Let me try to stand up. Let me try to stand up. Exactly. Exactly.
You can't make this shit up, guys. You literally cannot make this shit up. Arthur Knight would be taken to trial in 2022. There's so many pictures of it. It just looks, I mean, this guy, knowing that this guy is faking all this shit is just, it's sad and funny. It's like, it's very funny, like belly laugh funny, in your room alone type. You know, you don't really want to laugh at it that much, but it's like, this is ridiculous. The world is ridiculous. During the trial, Knight put out an article claiming that the Utah prosecutor, Levitt, and his wife Chloe were cannibalizing and murdering small children as a part of a ritual sex abuse ring. And this caused him to come out and make a public statement, leading him to cry on stage, defending himself and his wife. This was a big deal a couple years ago. I'm not sure if you guys remember seeing this, but it kind of made some headlines. And the whole story, though. Huh? Eventually, the judge would deem Arthur Knight to be Nick Oliverdian. No! And he would be extradited to the US in January of this year. Funnily enough, shortly before he was extradited, Nick maintained that he was Arthur Knight and would be willing to apologize to Nick's victims on behalf of Nick because he's so full of empathy and remorse and benevolence. After reaching the US, court proceedings continued for Nick because Arthur doesn't exist. And formally he'd represented himself, but in one hearing, which he delayed for 15 minutes because he needed oxygen administered, his lawyer cut off the prosecution when asking about his birth name to add a stipulation of co-identity, meaning that he would be assuming the identity of both Arthur Knight and Nicholas Oliverdian.
Well, guys, this was a quick hearing delayed by nearly 15 minutes as the defense claimed Oliverdian needed to be administered oxygen. And while allowing his lawyer to stipulate in this hearing that he's Nicholas Rossi, he still insisted on being called Arthur King.
Defense stipulates to identity.
Defense is stipulating to identity in this case?
Yes. For the purposes of preliminary hearing, for the purposes of this case, defense stipulates to identity.
He basically abandoned the false identity by claiming co-identity, but he still insisted upon being referred to as Arthur Knight. What? He also continued to wear goofy shit during the trial and even claimed that he converted to Orthodox Judaism by growing out his beard and wearing a hat. What the fuck? Evidently, this guy's not taking this seriously at all, and somehow he expects to win the case and return to England. However, there's a 100% chance that he will go to jail for the crimes that he has committed, hopefully around the world, hopefully for a really long time. And just like, what a terrible, weird piece of shit. There's rarely a piece of shit that's as unique as this guy. Upon hearing of the stipulation of co-identity, the prosecution didn't proceed further with questioning the expert on the stand and rested.
Your Honor, with the defense having stipulated to the identity in this case, the identity of the defendant, the state rests.
Essentially meaning that they're confident enough not to need to continue incriminating him, which means that he is very guilty and it looks terrible for him. Nicholas Oliverdian is the most extraordinarily narcissistic and manipulative person I have ever seen in my entire life. He thinks that he's the most intelligent man in the room always, and he tries to display this by creating false narratives to trick police, FBI, etc. He clearly has no remorse for any of his actions because he continued his awful behavior in the UK before finding a wife. And dude, you can try to claim all you want that all this stuff is in the past and you're literally a different person. Most people are just like, yeah, I'm kind of moved on past myself, yeah, found God, got baptized, etc., etc. Now this guy like literally became a different person. He became a different person. I'm gonna rename you to Nicholas Alaverdian, you stupid bitch. It is so painfully cringeworthy and obvious that it is this guy. He didn't hide his tracks that well. He was still posting on iCloud. He incriminated his now wife by having her call around as his widow to tell people that he had passed. I mean, he is such a massive doink. Is there another word to describe this other than monster, piece of shit, he should be rotting in jail, etc.? This guy's a doink too. Very rarely can you be a monster and a doink. Nicholas is set to go back to court in mid-October, and I would not be surprised if he was sentenced to life in prison like he rightfully deserves. Anyways, guys, hopefully you all enjoyed that story. Press the like button down below. Let me know if you have any additional information on this, on Nick, friend of the show, Nicholas Alaverdian. Yeah, whatever. Gump Club, shit is uncensored there. You also get cool codes and stuff for Sour Boys. 52 weeks, 52 flavors. Go to sour.gg. We have a candy company, and it massively helps the YouTube channel, etc., etc., etc.